Ladies and gentlemen, members and friends, it must be Wednesday. It must be Wednesday, our new midweek time, I guess, for our what are we going to call it? Our virtuals, our virtual streams. Lost for words in my first sentence, and I haven't even had a rum yet. Welcome to everyone, regardless. Andrew, thank you so much for joining as always.
Pleasure as always, Matt. Good to see you as always.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Now, this is our monthly virtual. We're doing it a little bit earlier this month because it is Champs Month, and of course, from next week onwards, Andrew and I are going to be pretty flat chat, including the rest of the team at the Society on Champs. And so, whilst we still can sneak in a few hours sleep here and there between now and next week, we're going to get our Rock and Rollers of Rum underway tonight. We have 40 of these packs out in the wild, who are out in the wild right now. Being enjoyed hopefully tonight. Some of you may be enjoying it at different times, of course, because Wednesday might not suit everyone, but it is time for us to talk a bit about rum. Before we dig straight into everything, and I'll pass over to Andrew, this is, of course, Rock and Rolls from Rum from our March outturn, which was all about music and malts. And there'll be a bit of a surprise at the end of this video, so don't go anywhere. We've got more to announce here, but this was our March virtual, the A side, if you like, of our music and malts for this year. And we thought we'd pair up rum with rock and talk a bit about some of those pairings, talk about some of the rums we're going to have tonight, and explore society rums, which we're going to dig into in a bit. It was actually, Andrew, am I right in saying this sort of came about from a discussion on our own community, on our own sort of Facebook group?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There were a couple of comments about when are we going to do a rum tasting, or, the Society has some fantastic rums. When are we going to get round to it? And just by chiming into that conversation, I thought, well, we should do this. And I think almost a month, like 5 weeks later, we've pulled this together. So talk about responding to what the members want.
Yeah.
And on that very note, I can see Dave Cook's tuned in the conversation here, and Dave was actually part of that communication on the Facebook group that made all that happen. So Dave, good to see you tonight. Welcome to all our friends in Perth.
Yeah, welcome to all our WA members, of course. And there's Dave's comment. Really appreciate this pack being put together. It was on our social groups. It was on our Facebook group. If you're not in that group, why not? This is a great discussion, a great place to get involved with the membership. If you're watching this on YouTube, then you can jump in the group, or if you're on the group, you can watch this on YouTube. We're streaming to both right now. In fact, we're even streaming to Twitch. What a world we're living in. We go everywhere these days. And I'm just going to announce nice and early, get it out of the way, because he's been itching to know the winner of tonight's rum pack for the amazing photos that he put together. They all made their way into April outturn. Here's a sneak peek of a double spread coming in the April outturn. We asked to see your journey of music and malts at the moment. And the winner of the rum pack is, of course, Lachlan Bell. Mate, you put so much effort into that, into picking out different albums that go with different casks. You put so many submissions in. We actually printed all of the photos that you put in into the outturn because we couldn't pick just one. So, yeah, it's definitely you. But I want to thank all the members who actually threw in for that one, because that was really great to see what music. And I mean, I love seeing that people are listening on CD, people are listening on Spotify, Apple Music, LP. Doesn't matter how you listen to it. It's just about the enjoyment of music and malts together. And so, Lachlan, that's definitely all yours. And there's the caption saying as such at the moment. So that's where I wanted to start. Andrew, let's where do you want to start? Let's head into it.
Where do you start?
Yeah.
Well, look, I guess let's lay out some ground rules for this evening. Tonight is not intended to be a masterclass on rum. I mean, it's the first virtual we've done. We've attached rums. Matt and I are really keen tonight to talk about rum, to give a little bit of history. Certainly history for a bit about rum, but we're going to compare it to what we know. And there's some touch points between rum and whiskey that I think are worth exploring. And I think it'd be good to chat about these things. But we're not intending for tonight to be a masterclass we're not going to get to the end of tonight and you're going to know everything about rum. That's not the plan. But between the two of us, we can certainly fill in some dots. And I know from a rum event that we did for Society members in Sydney a couple of years ago, it was just incredible seeing the parallels between the two drinks and seeing what the two had in common. And I think if you know your Scotch history, if you know a bit about Scotch production, and some of the market forces that impact the Scotch industry and maturation, it blows your mind just how many parallels and equivalences there are in the rum world. And that'll bear itself out in some of the conversations tonight. But look, I think before we go too much further, we should really discuss what is rum. What actually is it? We're familiar with whiskey. It's a spirit that is made from, at the end of the day, a cereal grain, which we ferment to make a beer and we distill it. Rum, the chief source ingredient is sugar. And so you start out with sugar, you make a sugary liquid that you ferment, and then you're distilling that. And we can get into some technicalities. We can talk about agricole rums where it's actually distilled from sugarcane juice, or we can talk about traditional rums, and that's mostly what we're tasting tonight, which is made from molasses. But at the end of the day, sugar is the raw ingredient. From a fermentation point of view, in order to make alcohol, the yeast consumes the sugar. And so, the Scots have a hard time of that, trying to, that's why they malt the barley to get the sugars in the cereal grain. Obviously, if you're starting out with sugar, it's already there and you've got an easy time of it. But the history is fantastic. In whiskey circles, we talk about, everyone seems to have there's this myth or legend that, maybe the Irish started distilling, maybe the Irish invented whiskey before the Scots, and then people look back at the time frame and the fact that there was a written reference to malt whiskey at the end of the 15th century. Again, rum has those equivalent parallels. There's references to rum and rum-like drinks that we've found histories of going back thousands of years. Just like Friar John Core and the reference to the 8 bowls of malt in whatever year that was, 1490 something. There's a written reference to rum that goes back a bit earlier than most people think, in the 1600s. Where did it originate from? That's you can debate that till the cows come home. What's going to be great about tonight is that we're going to be exploring rums from a few different countries and areas. When you look at the history of rum production and the traditions around it, it revolves, can be whether the country was colonized by the French, whether it was colonized by the English, and even that had an impact on things. We're not even going to scratch the surface about the role that rum played in the economy of some countries and the history. I mean, in Australia, we have a fantastic tradition with rum. We had our very own rum rebellion. The famous mutiny came about because the Governor Bligh decided to pretty much ban rum, and got himself ousted. And it was 2 years until Governor Macquarie came and restored order. So there's so much history there. And we'll touch on a little bit as we go through, but that's a lot of chatting for to start things off. I think we should have a tot, shouldn't we? I was about to say dram, but we should have a tot.
Yeah, a tot. I think we call them a tot, don't we? Yeah, a tot of rum. I love I actually do love the different words that different countries and different spirits get like over history. So we say dram for Scotch whiskey, we say tot for rum, and the one I love the most is a nobbler of whiskey for Australian. And that's a really old Australian word for a dram of whiskey. Anyway, the one we're starting with tonight is, if you want to pour it into your glass, or if you have already, is R2.14. The order we're going in tonight, for those wondering at home, is the order as it is on the front of your menu, on the Rock and Rollers of Rum virtual tasting menu that came in your box. So we're starting with the R2.14. We actually end with an R2 as well. So that'll be a nice sort of, if you want to keep a smidge in this glass, maybe. And just my own little sort of plug here is that, of course, I would say the optimum glass to enjoy rum out of would be the SMWS Spirits glass. There it is, available in the shop now for members. Of course, if you don't have one of these glasses, I'm not even holding in the right spot near the camera. There we go. Boom, there it is. So great glass that was developed for our spirits range, our non-whiskey range, if you like, at the society. Now we're starting with a Guianese rum. We're starting with R2. Now we don't say distillery names. This is a Demerara rum, though. This is a Guianese single cask that's had an additional maturation, I think, for 4 years in a second fill French oak barrique.
I think it's fascinating when you look at the aging of rums. And for those who don't know, the aging of rum, again, and sorry, I'm going to repeat myself a fair bit tonight, but the parallels with whiskey are all there. All the same things that govern the maturation of Scotch whiskey, the choice of using American oak, other oaks, the fact that so much of the wood comes from the bourbon industry, the cask offset, all applies to rums as well.
Scott Mansfield, our Queensland state manager, says, "Good fellow Friar John Core, 1492." Thanks, Scott. Any clue on the still used? Yeah, we'll get to that question, Owen. Sorry.
Oh, well, that question that popped up for a moment is an interesting one, because this is a fascinating distillery. It's one of the oldest ones in the world. It's got a huge different number of stills in the distillery that use and produce the different types of rums. In whiskey, we can talk about heavily peated, not peated, all those different styles. Rum has exactly that same kaleidoscope or spectrum, from heavy rums to light rums, and the type of still they use will influence that. This particular distillery has an original wooden coffee still, almost like the original was patented design, as well as some traditional old Navy stills, the big pot stills, and then some much more modern 4-column and 5-column stills. Which to this particular one come from, we don't know, I'm afraid.
This is the nose and palate on this are just like, I think the name Caribbean crab cakes is really apt. There's a certain almost like seafood funkiness or fishy funkiness to the spirit in a strange way, but a really appealing way. If you were to say to someone who's not tasting this right now, "Oh, I'm getting a seafood note in my rum, in my sweet rum," you'd be like, "That sounds revolting," but it actually works really well. It's definitely a nice dark rum. This is very old for rum as well. Like 17 years for rum in the rum world is a very old spirit. It's worth mentioning as well.
Yeah, and it's I find some rums can be sweet on the palate, but then the finish can turn bitter very quickly, or becomes a saccharine sweetness. This for me is a beautifully natural sweetness.
Yeah.
You just popped up a comment on the screen there about being more savory, and it's got that as well. I think that there's that complexity that makes it a great rum.
That saccharine sweetness that you mentioned might have something to do with some of the added sugar content that some rums have. Like you often taste those dark rums that are get so much sugar added. I just want to make this point now, and I'm sure Andrew, you're probably going to touch on this, but just that whole thing about there's a lot more regulation in like Scotch whiskey than there is in even the word rum or rum or agricole or whichever. You can add sugar, you can add spices, you can add coloring, you can dosage, you can all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't. It's still rum. Like it's still the classification. Spiced rum is still rum, for instance.
I think it's interesting that some producers take great advantage of that and get away with things that some other producers frown on, and others take, I don't know, maybe I'm taking a license here, but some take the moral high ground and say, well, we don't add this, we don't add that. Ours is very pure, and different markets and brands and price tags reflect that.
We're
going on a bit of a global tour tonight. Also, the rums we're looking at coming from different countries. Matt, I think you've got a little map to bring up and tell us where we are.
That's where we are. There's Guyana. There's on the top end
Beautiful.
of sort of coastal end of Guyana, of South America. There we've got. We're not too far away from some of the other distilleries that we're if we're going to be touching on Trinidad later on. But there we go. Just to give some. Andrew and I were talking about how he and I often talk about Highland whiskey, Speyside whiskey, Campbelltown whiskey, all that kind of stuff, and we immediately know those regions. Or if we say this whiskey's from Kentucky or this whiskey's from Scotland, or we already know. We're saying, oh, this is. I think there's a lot less context to where rum's made. I think for many people, well, for me at least, and I hope that helps.
And that's a really good point, because there are some guidelines, rules of thumb that you can stick to. In terms of light rum versus heavy rum, there's a tradition that built up over, I guess, the centuries. The light rums tend to originate from the countries that were originally colonized by the Spanish. Now, why is that? That's an interesting point. Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, even. Whereas the heavy rums traditionally come from the countries that were colonized by the French and English. The Haiti, Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, and the Virgin Islands.
Great tasting note, Dan Godden. The satisfying funk of a post-seafood barbecue wafting across the deck. That's exactly what I mean. And someone said earlier, Andrew Newcomb said earlier here, have tried 3 of the R2 rums lately and all have a certain funk. Yeah, they do. And that's we'd call that, a distillate character, a distillery character almost. And I don't think the French oak in this case has sort of changed that funk at all. It hasn't sort of masked it. It's kept that lovely character. It could have, there probably could be a 20 or 25-year-old in cask of this rum and probably still hold on to that distillate, which is just lovely. I love it when that happens. Andrew, there's actually a bit of society history with rums, and we've got a guest to jump in with us as well, just to talk a little bit about some of that history. You wanted to touch on this as well.
Yeah, look, just before we do that, I'll back up one step also. We did have an incredible night in Sydney, and I'm going to get the year wrong here. I think it was about maybe 5-6 years ago, and it was a rum night.
It was 10 years ago.
No, not 10.
It was.
No way.
It was early 13, so almost 9 and a bit years ago. Yeah.
Oh, that is scary. Well, time flies when you're having fun. Anyway, this was back at the time when the Society was bottling some rums, and we'll touch on it shortly with our special guest who's going to join us. But the Society started bottling a whole stack of rums at the strength they came off, more or less off the stills and in the barrel. And so we saw some rums that were bottled at 71% ABV. There was one that, if I remember correctly, 83% ABV. And they were huge, bursting with flavour. So we did this amazing night in Sydney, and it was, an evening with rum. And we had 3 Society whiskies, and we teamed up with the guys from Quinton Time, who are great mates of ours, and they're responsible for bringing in some of the really well upper end brands of rum into the country. And it was an incredible night. And you can imagine we were tasting these rums that were in the high 70s, high 80% of the Society ones. The commercial ones that they brought in were high 40s as well. And it was a night that could have been a recipe for very sore heads the next day. And my lasting memory of the night the event was waking up the next day and feeling like $1 million. I don't think I've ever had so much alcohol and woken up the next day feeling so brilliant. And I can only assume that it was just the quality of the rum and the fact that there was just so few congeners in it that just made it spectacular. So I've never forgotten that. And I intend to put another event on in Sydney in the not too distant future. But that was the last time we had an official rum tasting for the Society. But our history of rum goes back a long way. In fact,
there was another rum tasting. There was another one, but that was also accompanied by other spirits as well. But that was, yeah.
You're very true. That was only just last year, wasn't it? In between lockdowns.
Oh, no. This was like 2019, late 18, 19 sort of era. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
In any event, so the Society bottled its first rums in 2001. The first Society rum to come in Australia was 2006. And oh goodness me, hang on. What
Here it is.
Be? There it is, R4. So this was made available to members in 2006. Yours truly picked up a bottle. Oh, we're going to make it large, are we? 99. And I'll tell you what blew me away with this one. It was matured in an Oloroso sherry cask. So it's an incredible Trinidad rum, matured in an Oloroso cask. And this was heavenly. We only had 18 bottles in the entire country. About 4 of them got poured out at our events around the country. So that left 14 for members. I'm sorry to say it left 13 for members because I helped myself to this one. But in any event, that was R4. So that's what they looked back in the early days. But Matt, why don't we dial in our good friend Alex to hear a bit more about the early history?
Well, there's the intro. Alex Moores, our Victorian State Manager, is joining us, who has been doing a lot of historian work with the Society over the last couple of years, even with the UK branch, in terms of like identifying some of the history that has perhaps fallen between the gaps. So, Alex, welcome to the stream.
Hi all. I can hear you perfectly. How am I coming across?
Loud and clear. Perfect.
Articulate as always.
Excellent. I'm very aware that everyone on this stream, including the audience, probably knows more about rum than I do. But at least I can give a little bit of the backdrop to the Society's role in it.
Whilst we're having this chat, we might encourage our guests just to pour 9.9, R9.9, just to keep the spirit flowing whilst we're having a chat, which is our actually first ever feature. This has never been featured before. This is a First feature of R9.9. Here we go. Nope, that's not going to zoom in. But yeah, if you've got the bottle, you can see it yourself. Challenging conventional wisdom, a 13-year-old Panamanian rum. So, Alex, take it away. Sorry.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I look, I won't hold you up and stop the dramming, but I'll sort of pick up from where
the totting.
The totting. That's right. I do love a tot. That's a good word. I'll pick up where Andrew left off. So spot on. The first three were in 01, and they all had exactly the same sort of packaging. There was I'm sure an early days of marketing decision to give every different country of origin for rum a different color. So where Andrew says Trinidad, I think it looks slightly bluish, greenish. There was a bit of a color spectrum they were using at the time, where it says, for example, Jamaican rum or what have you. And so 2006 was R4, and there was a bit of a gap until about 11, 12. And it's difficult when we start to talk about release dates because there's sort of UK release and then when Australia got it, and that can have a gap or be pretty contemporaneous at different times of the society's history. But let's say 11, 12, they added about 8 new bottlings. That's where we get into the famous sort of R5.1, and that's the 81.3% natural cask strength that Andrew was talking about. But there was a little bit of a slowdown, and then 2016 was when it really, really picked up. We were up to about 10 different rum codes by 2016, and it sort of was I think a bit of a lead into 2017. The society was clearly positioning to really revamp the single cask spirits range. So that was when we saw Ian Burrell come on as a consultant. I think don't want to give credit to the wrong people, but probably like Helen Stewart from the UK branch had a lot to do with pulling together experts from the different parts of the single cask spirit range. For example, like Geraldine Coates for the gin part, and Ian was our rum guy, consulted on tasting notes, really started to put those rums into not into flavour categories, but for example, that point earlier around the different stills being used, sort of try to describe the rums differently to members, because where we've got flavour profiles in whiskey, as in the colour codes we've been using for a long time, rums don't really have that distinction. And as we'll see on this lineup, there's quite a broad flavour variety in rum that if you just say, oh, it's a rum, it's a society single cask rum, you might not be giving a member a true view of what type of rum it is. So about 17 was when they really revamped the single cask spirits profile. So we're up to about...
And on that point, sorry to jump in, on that point, I don't know, if everyone's nosing at R9.9, it is first and foremost radically different from where we've just come from. And it's much more like, whereas like, barbecued sort of seafood sort of in that first one, this one's much more like cherry ripe straight away for me, like that, like an actual cherry ripe chocolate bar kind of nose going on straight away.
And I'm sure they'll probably get touched on by the taste experts on here in a bit, but I think actually Andrew sort of already touched on it. Some of those early big belting high ABVs were probably a product of it worked at that ABV, and maybe it wasn't particularly prevalent in the OB range of that distillery. But then there were a couple where maybe OB range is probably 40% and it didn't work so well. And that was sort of well managed by a combination of Ewan and Ian and a few other of the team in the UK, because the single cask spirits rum range actually saw a little bit of a deviation from that whole undiluted concept that's so important to all of us. For example, like the R8s, a lot of them are diluted a little bit. They're still sort of up there, as you still refer to them as cask strength. But yeah, the society sort of put out a called the Rum Crib Note. If anyone wants to Google that, it just explains a little bit about the logic behind some need a bit of dilution, just because when they're at that still strength, really high belter, if they're from particular distilleries, sometimes it can be just absolutely too much. And again, we'll come to it, but for example, R5.1, that distillery was often used as effectively rum concentrate. You'd have like a sort of a rubbish or a general product, and that was so intense on the right flavor notes you were looking for that you just drop a couple of drops of that into other rums and emphasize what you were looking for. So sort of a single cask of that on its own, I mean, ironically, that one kind of was pretty tasty on its own, but some of these don't necessarily work at their natural strength, whereas we would all argue, all whiskies work at cask strength. It's just about then diluting it yourself. So yeah, I guess maybe There's a few different examples within the rum profile. I won't whittle on for too long, but those early ones were generally done quite a bit older and quite a bit stronger. So, for example, like R1, I think all of them, maybe apart from one, was above sort of 20 years old. Same with R13, the decision was made. But then others are particularly good at younger ages. As with whiskey, sometimes a particular distillery will shine at a particular age. So I think we haven't done an R11 over 9 years old. It's just how it works.
Yeah,
I think there was also a mindset involved. I think in those early rums, the ones that came out of that period, I think the society still had possibly a mindset of, we're a single cask club, and we'll just take the cask and bottle it, and it is what it is. And I think over time, a couple of things emerged. All the points you just made there, Alex, exactly. I think if we're honest, there may also be a mindset of, is it ethically responsible to be bottling something that's 75, 80% alcohol? A bit of that came into play, I think. And then, as you said, everything about making sure that the flavour was actually right. But interesting evolution, as you say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was a big, I love about the society, it's always been about transparency, and there's no reason to hide what it is. Even, early days of 1983, we're putting distillation dates and bottling dates on bottles, that kind of thing. Rum's that interesting one where I think for a while, I'm fascinated by these changes in the mentality of the society, but like your bottle there, Andrew, for bourbons, for rums, for early Armagnacs and cognacs, they were all, and even the first Irish whiskies that ended up with proper codes in the actual whiskey coding system, they were seen as probably a little bit of a side project, and it wasn't clear when they were started where they were going to go. So there's a fun era for the nerds out there between around 2006, when that one comes from, and the 11-12 era I was talking about, where in 08 we moved to the bold code, or what I call the bold code era, or some call it the polymer label. And that had capacity to have a lot more detail on the front of the label, including tasting notes. And so some of those 11-12 rums were the first time we were really seeing, I think probably globally in terms of independent bottling, a lot of attention put into describing rum in the way that you would describe whiskey, because rum's always a different category. It might be, rum of a particular type, whether it's dark rum, light rum, agricole, you've got a couple of categories, but it wasn't that real intense, let's make it past panel, let's really dig down into the flavor profile. So the sort of 11-12 era onwards gave the society that avenue to put it on the front label, do full outturn notes about it. Whereas the pre-era in 06, I'm sure there were notes taken, and there certainly were from a panel perspective, but they weren't really often put on the bottle. They might have been in the outturn it came with, or what have you. But, you bought it as just Jamaican rum, Trinidadian rum, because they weren't quite sure what they had. And then there was a real focus on it at a couple of key later points to show members what they were drinking.
Awesome. There's a question there from James Nutt. Which distillery? James, we try not to mention the distilleries. It's not just a game we play, but it is the society ethos. That's why we have a coded system.
I did just flash up the core range. That might give you an idea of which distillery it's from, just to show you that they do have a core range, and we from this R9, and we don't really talk about the distilleries Andrew's saying, but they don't really get importation into Australia either. So it doesn't really have a market here at all. So I don't think anyone actually brings it in. But it's I think those are mostly at 40 or they're all at 40%, or one's even at 37%. But there you go.
It's a fascinating distillery. They make a point. Some people might know when you're cultivating the cane sugar, they like to burn it for a couple of reasons. It's cut by hand often, and by setting fire to the field first, it does a few things. One of which is kills the scorpions in the grass so that the cutters don't get stung. But this particular distillery makes a point of not burning it, and therefore keeping the cane as pure as possible. But they do make two different types of rum at this distillery, founded back in 1908. They make agricole rum from this cane juice, and that's more like for local consumption on the island there, and in the country, not island, it's Panama. Whereas the stuff that comes in, the more traditional molasses-based one is for export.
Before we say goodbye to Alex and thank him for his dropping in as a special guest for this dram, there was a question specific for him here. Let me just grab it. Joel Rinaldi asks you, does Alex buy an SMWS tasting glass with each bottling?
I'm sure that's a reference to my backdrop. No, Joel, I wish I did. I actually haven't touched wood broken that many, so it's really just an accumulating over the years. But I occasionally do little events at home, or when I have people around, I always like to give them that type of glass. So it's always good to have a lot in stock.
Alex,
Matt, just before I drop off as well. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say before I drop off, shout out in the SMWS rum world. I'm my current sort of fascination with all these member experts, because I'd like to sort of think I'm not an expert, but maybe enthusiasts better. But fascinated members who seek out more information, and definitely there's a UK member, Lance Surajubali, who's been doing this for ages. A fascination with SMWS rum. So I've sort of got a few helper points from him along the way. So it's only fair to shout him out. But it's a fascinating journey of the single cask spirits. I think it's the Scotch Malt Whisky Society that often sort of means members might overlook the other spirits. So I'm thrilled, there's a rum tasting on. And all the spirit range, there's so much to find that are either akin to whiskey in the ways you want, or different enough that you'll get a whole new category that is fascinating to you if you just reach out into those. Like we had the gin night the other night, that was an eye-opener for me. Any single cask spirits, great when you don't usually grab for a bottle of that thing on a shelf.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is eye-opening. It's just great to see, different audiences and different members in appreciating that as well. So thanks again, Alex. Really appreciate your time. Have a great evening, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Excellent, guys. I'll follow along from home. Cheers.
Thanks, mate. Hey, Matt, just a fascinating point about this distillery. This cask, this very bottling. Do you realize that if this had been distilled the very next day, it would only be 3 years old? Work that out.
Hold on. Hold on. Let me have a look at the date on it. I think I know where you're going with this. Where's my little sample?
It was distilled on the 28th of February, 2008. Now, 2008 was a leap year. So if it had been filled on the 29th, they would only have a birthday and anniversary every 4 years. So it would only be a 3-year-old rum.
So you'd have to keep it in the cask 4 times as long to get it any sort of equivalent.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just a couple of comments I wanted to jump into here whilst we're enjoying that dram. Scorpions in the Grass says Dan Godden sounds like a society name. That is actually a cool sort of bottling name. There you go. That would probably be, I'd say that'd be a 46 or maybe a rum. And then Jason says, so cool to see how far the society has come from back in the day. It's so true. Like it's Andrew touched on this before about how we, it's sort of, there would have been casks that we'd gotten and then just bottled at natural cask strength and these sort of, absolutely eye-wateringly high vaporous kind of rums. But so much has happened in our spirits development, and with Ewan and the team and the whole production team and tasting panel, which is more than twice as many people now in production in society production team for spirits than there was even just 3 years ago. And so it's great to see how we've developed those spirits and how we're so much more confident in these rums that we're bottling now, rather than it just being what we can and what we knew. Back then it was like we were a whiskey club that we sort of almost accidentally stumbled across some rums. But then after all that consult with Ian Burrell and the team members, it's just been great to grow that education and grow that knowledge of what we're doing. And I think that the rums we're tasting tonight are evidence of that. Like we're seeing the modern evolution of society rums at the society now, which is just fantastic. Leap year, correct, Dove, but I'm not sure about your spelling of leap there. Okay, so let's. I reckon we jump into that next rum though. How are we going? Are we going? Are we tracking okay? I don't want to push anyone along here. We're moving now to R13.2. Now this is the real showstopper. I'm glad we're not doing it too late in the lineup. This is a very, very cool piece of distilling history, I'll say.
Matt, would you agree that this is the rum equivalent of tasting a Port Ellen?
Yeah,
is that a fair call?
Yeah, I think it is. I would actually go so far as to say, actually, you know what? I'm going to change my mind. I think this is the rum equivalent of tasting a Conval Moor.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Because like in whiskey, like Port Ellen's almost like that sort of like, everyone knows of that closed distillery, but there's those who go, oh, but have you tried a Convalmore before? And you go, and it's like, yeah, no, I haven't. And or it's like, yeah, you can only find 30+ year old Convalmores these days because the distillery closed that long ago. It's like, I think it's a little bit still. I know it got. We've all heard. I'm gonna sort of say the distillery name here in saying this, but there was that what they called Corona Mania, where sort of that mad rush after Luca Gargano bought all the casks. But I just think it's kind of like, yeah, I still think it's a bit more of it's almost like the Convalmore of the rum world rather than Portland. But I get where you're going. Obviously, it is like that though. You're tasting a piece of demolished history. I did. I'll just quickly bring up our slide here. And where are we? There we are. There's where the distillery was. It is a demolished distillery. It doesn't look like much today. It looks pretty decrepit these days.
It's a tragedy. It was the last rum distillery on the island. The distillery went from 50 down to 8, down to 1, down to none.
Yeah, and it was this was the. Yeah, it was the modern history being that of Luca Gargano almost accidentally stumbling across it on a research trip and buying all the casks from Vellier and the society's worked closely with Vellier before and there he is and he picked up all those casks and we're now enjoying, I guess, almost the end of this era in a way. We're not going to see too much of this moving forward. I mean, I think our 13.3 has been bottled maybe, but after that it's kind of like we're going to be running short on numbers soon.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating thing. I mean, the distillery, it's a bit harsh to call it a flash in a pan, but I mean, it was only founded in 1923 and closed in 2001, so it had a relatively short span for something that developed a massive reputation.
It's a very unique style though, this rum, and it's definitely not a style of rum that is for everyone. And I mean that in a good way. It's like it was a very much a if you're really accustomed to sweet rums, this probably isn't going to be your sort of your bag. This is probably going to be much more of they were very dry, heavy style naval rums, and they were very like that sort of very like dry naval rums, and they were obviously produced for the British Navy, but it wasn't just like it was. Yeah, it's very much an acquired taste in rum. I think it's fair to say as well.
I think that the connection to the Royal Navy is interesting. My dad, my old man, was in the Royal Australian Navy, but he spent a couple of years seconded to the Royal Navy, and the daily ration of rum existed in the Royal Navy till 1970. My dad joined the Australian Navy as a 13-year-old in 1954. So in the 1960s, when he spent his 4 years in the UK serving on a British frigate, he tells me about the days of the old the rum ration they used to get. It's fascinating to think that that was only, as I say, up to 1970. The last modern navy to dispense with the daily ration of rum, would you believe, was the Kiwi Navy. It was New Zealand that was the last country to abolish the daily ration of rum.
Yeah, right. And what year was that?
72, I think. Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong.
Some great.
Sorry, I mentioned earlier that there were no distilleries left on Trinidad. I was wrong there. Of course, the Angostura distillery is still going strong.
But they import all their sugarcane, don't they? Now they don't farm.
That's what led to the closure of this distillery. The government basically decided to dispense with the sugar, supporting the sugarcane industry, and they sold it at the time to Angostura for $35 million US dollars. Yeah,
seems cheap at the time, doesn't it?
Yeah, sounds ridiculously cheap.
It's someone's asked, isn't it? It's owned by Vellier and La Maison. Now, I don't know about the La Maison ownership aspect, but I know Vellier was responsible through Gargano's efforts of reviving it from about 2004 onwards, which is why we get to enjoy what we've got now. And I think he probably picked up all those casks for really. He would have picked up those casks for pennies on the pound back then. But great tasting notes coming in saying. This is weird, but 13.2 smells like the inside of my kid's pencil case. That's a cool tasting note. That's what I mean about it. It's like a dark, very savory kind of weird rum. And these R13s are not your typical dark rums. They're not your typical rums by any means. But it really is good to take a moment with this and just go, it's a piece of a country's history, and it's a piece of distilling history that it's a $595 a bottle. It's also something that is quite rare and quite unusual, and I think it's very cool to taste. It smells like erasers, like the erasers in a pencil case. There you go. And Alex Moores has, of course, just mentioned here that I hope I wasn't too dates and stats enjoying some rums at this end myself. I don't quite believe you, Alex. I don't believe you're enjoying a rum.
Not at all. That was tremendous input to the discussion.
Absolutely. And if any members have any fun old society facts, always love a PM and a chat. Cheers. And of course, the nerdier, the better.
What we haven't talked about too much tonight, Matt, is adding water. This is one of the higher ABVs at 62.1. I have to say, I don't feel compelled to add water. I'll be honest, I've got set up tonight. I didn't even bring a little thing of water to bring in and add, but I just don't feel the need. This is so wonderfully soft and refined. There's nothing aggressive in it, and neither were his two predecessors tonight.
It's funny you say that. I didn't actually prepare to add water to mine either. I don't have a water jug on the table either. And that's probably almost like, that was probably a subconscious decision, because I just don't add water to like Armagnac, cognac, rum, other spirits at a cask strength. I just don't feel the need. And when I have tried adding water, they often really fall apart. They become really washy and terrible. Is ready-made marmalade the one we used for last year's tasting? No, I think that was the R13.1, which we had in last year's tasting. But I'd have to check my notes. But I think this is the next cask along. And there we go. I'll pop the cask detail up on the screen there. That's a very unique rum. Definitely one of the stranger pieces of distillate.
I'm okay with the flavors. I don't find it out there. It's the mouthfeel that's more interesting for me. Of our three rums so far tonight, that one's the driest. It leaves quite a dry footprint behind. I'm actually I don't have water to add to my rums, but I did pour myself a glass just to refresh, and I feel the need to do so now after that rum.
Very much so.
Tasty stuff.
Now, what rock band would we pair this one with?
What rock band?
This is rock and rollers of rum, after all.
That's very true. You and I have slightly different tastes in rock music.
I think I'm a little bit less hair metal than you are. That's all.
That's a really good question. Now, there's something about this. I think would go well with Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Are they still together?
No, but it would go well with it.
Well, but we need to go with a band that's no longer together. This is a distillery that no longer exists. You got to go with it.
Yeah.
So you can't go with the Rolling Stones. They'll never stop. I do love this.
You throw me there. Now I'm trying to get too academic and think about it. That was the Eagles. The Eagles.
Yeah, okay, the Eagles.
I
can't stand the Eagles, but I can stand this rum, so that makes sense.
Adult orientated rock, yeah, sure. Pearl Jam's interesting. I was wondering whether to go down the grunge line, but it didn't work for me.
You're going to make our newest staff member Adam very happy with that comment. He's a massive Pearl Jam fan, so you know what, that works.
I'm generally not a fan of Pearl Jam or Nirvana, but that's just because they killed hair metal when they came out. So
they put a sour taste in your mouth from your Steel Panther LP collection. Just like, what can I do now?
Nirvana and Pearl Jam came out and killed Motley Crue and Poison overnight. So
didn't kill the Motley Crue fan base. They're still going strong. Don't worry.
Not going as strong as they were, mate. They're getting older and they're getting weak in their old age.
Maybe Grateful Dead then.
Yeah, I think Owen's made a good point there. Surely it's got to be something some in reggae, Bob Marley or something.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think Bob Marley is the staple of the reggae. So there we go.
Thank you, Andrew Newcomb. I can see your comment there. Yeah, that is when I shaved it off, actually.
Yes, it is true. Andrew once did have a shoulder length hair.
Shoulders, beyond the shoulders, mate. It was halfway down the back.
That's a good call. There you go. Dan says more Queens of the Stone Age. You hadn't heard of them, but once you had, all the other bands didn't quite cut it. Queens of the Stone Age are very good. Very, very good. And maybe someone a bit younger asking Poison. What's that?
Someone a bit younger.
Well, I don't know.
Right. Before I get more embarrassed, we should move on to the next rum.
Yeah. Let's. I don't want to spend all night embarrassing you. R11.12. Here we go. So we are moving finally to Jamaica. Here we are. There's the distillery. And this is an operating distillery now. This is we're going back into operational distilleries here. There it is. This is, of course, if you can see the name from there, then you can get an idea what the name of the distillery is. But we're going to go with R11.12, Dunder the Sea. Now, Morsey, just before, made a comment about how we mostly see younger expressions from this distillery because it's one of those. It is much more of a new world distillery where it works very well in that age range. Pour a bit of this. Now, again, this. No, sorry, I was just going to say this is also a new feature. This has not ever been featured by the Society before. So you are the first to taste this particular cask, this R11, Dunder the Sea.
Can I make a suggestion, Matt? If anyone tuned in right now and was thinking about, what are they drinking? Is it rum? Is it any good? And right now you've got a bit of text on the screen saying poison. We should probably get rid of that.
Oh, yeah, sure. Here we go. Well, let this. What are they drinking? Yeah.
They're drinking poison.
R11.12 Dunder the Sea. Now,
very pale compared to its predecessors tonight. In fact, it's the palest in the lineup. Now it's young, so same principles apply. It's spent less time in the wood, and therefore it's taken on less color. It's also a second fill barrel. But that begs the question: is it a light or a heavy rum?
Somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Love this tasting note from Owen, who says R11 is pure aniseed and chewy bike inner tube all wrapped in a banana leaf. That's an amazing tasting note.
The banana leaf is a good call there. 100%.
I remember talking to our spirits director, Kai Ivalo, in about 2018, and I asked him a question because we were starting to see some of the rums come through that of this new era of working with Ian and whatnot, and we were sort of saying, and I didn't really know where to start personally. I was like, my question to Kai was, of all the rum codes, which one would I get first? If I was buying a Society rum, where would I start? And his answer was R11. It was like, just have a taste of these R11s and see what you think. Because he said that they were sort of, because we saw some really early R11s like in that year. I think it was R11.3 or .4 or something. And he was bang on. They are just, I'm much more spirit-driven rum and not so sugary, not so traditional, much more agricole in nature, much more sort of and a lot of the rum nerds will say that agricole rum will provide a bit more terroir to the rum, to a bit more sort of the earthiness, a bit more of the sense of place, and a bit more sort of spirit-driven. I quite like a spirit-driven whiskey, I found out that I quite do. I quite a bit more like a spirit-driven rum as well. So,
yeah, wow.
And Ed says it has a similar vinyl funk, like the R2.11. Yeah, if you've got a smidge of the R2. Oh no, we didn't have 2.11. We had 2.13 and 2.14, but we haven't got to the 13 yet. But if you've got a smidge of your R2.14 left, maybe do a side by side.
It's a fascinating nose. For me, it's got that rum note that can head slightly into acetone characters. There's a touch of it there. I think the other thing too, when you talk about age and we tend to get this distillery young, it's worth bearing in mind. It's a young distillery. It was only actually rebuilt in 2005. the distillery itself, or the estate, more to the point, hadn't made rum since 1960, I think 1960. So it was quiet for 45 years when the family decided it was time to start distilling again, and they rebuilt a new purpose distillery.
Wow. Awesome comment from Dan Godden. Again, Dan, you're on fire tonight. Smells a little bit like a leaky ballpoint pen, like ink, but delicious. Ink, like pen ink, is a great tasting note for that one.
Yeah, that's exactly, and that's almost. I think that's a similar descriptor to the acetone I was touching on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that acetone sort of like nail polish remover note in some Jamaican rums is something that is either something I think you love or hate in a rum, and I'm definitely on the love side for that kind of style. It's very, very brisk. And Land Rover says, just here to hang out. Look forward to getting back on the weekend. Thank you, Land Rover.
Yeah, I just saw that comment that you're giggling at. Yeah.
Yeah. 2 virtuals in a row, and I got it right twice. How's that? Yeah.
I commend you for having a stab at it. I always give it a miss.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah. And this is definitely a Jimmy Cliff match. Dove, I mean, again, yeah. And great comment from Owen again. Their production is great. Estate fields and on-site processing, molasses pumped straight down to the distillery, all grown, processed, and distilled on site. Yeah, very cool distillery, very cool modern distillery in many ways.
Well, that's the fascinating thing. I mean, you talk about the estate goes back to 1720, and in fact, it's only been owned by 3 families over that period. Would you believe? And rum production was intermittent through that, but it was very much a case of. I mean, you want to talk about a paddock to bottle. This is all taking place on the one place, using their own cane on their own estate. I was reading also that this particular distillery has been fantastic at being very efficient in their production. One of the stats that was quoted was that it typically takes around. I'm not talking about the rum production here, but just simply the production of sugar, and you need the sugar for the marketing the sugar. But you need 11 tons of harvested cane to produce 1 ton of sugar. And this particular estate only needs 9 tons. So they've obviously, and the funny fallout of that is the more efficient a sugar producer gets at extracting the sugar means the less sugars there are in the molasses that we need for rum. So the more efficient the sugar production, the less efficient the rum production is, because there's less sugars in the molasses to start with. That's an interesting little quirk.
Right.
Comment from Jason there. Look at the angle at the line arm. Yeah, you wouldn't see that in Scotland, would you?
No, you wouldn't get away with that in Scotland. You'd be you
wouldn't get away with it.
Drawn and quartered for trying to do a line arm like that, wouldn't you?
Shout out to Scotty Fitzsimons. I was at a tasting not long ago, and someone talked about the upwards descending line arms, and he made the very sage observation. Oh, yes, you can smell the upward descending line arm.
yeah. Don't nerd out too much in front of a crowd. Those line arms. What's that old one? Yes, this was definitely distilled on a Wednesday.
That's I'm really enjoying the complexity of that. I think despite being a younger rum, I think we slotted it beautifully into the lineup. I think number 4 was exactly where this needed to be. And despite being more youthful, it's got a complexity that is just sitting beautifully at where we've sat it.
Oh, agreed. Yeah, it's very zesty, and I think it would have almost at 66.9% as well. It would have almost taken over if it was before the R13, for instance.
Yeah. Again, though, I have no compulsion to add water. This is so, and this gets back to the comment at the start about when we did the rum event with rums that were in the 70s and 80%. You just didn't feel it. They were so clean. Wow.
It's a tight one between the R9.9 and this one. Yeah, they're very different, Dove. For me, they're probably my two favorite tonight as well. The R9.9 for me was just fantastic. It was like that sort of like coconut cake and cherry ripe thing going on in that R9, which I want to revisit. I've only poured just a smidge of each sample, so I can come back to that R9. But the R11 for me is also just fantastic.
It might be a conversation for another night, but on the back of your tasting sheets for tonight, we have actually provided a little map there of what I would basically call the Caribbean or Caribbean, and the countries there, and that's where our focus is tonight. But let's not lose sight of the fact that rum is made all around the world. There's some amazing rums being made in Australia. And maybe that's something to look at down the track as well. When will we see the first Society Australian rum?
Yes.
I've been asked that 4 times. How about you? You've probably got that about 30 times, I'm guessing.
I've lost count, mate. I've lost count. I love that. That is really like that would also that would make a ripper mojito. That would be like just. That'd make that'd mix really well.
We talked earlier about what band would you pair with something. I think I don't know about a band, but I reckon this is definitely the rum that you would pair with a movie. And if you're going to watch a film with this, it would have to be Cool Runnings.
Cool Runnings. I haven't seen Cool Runnings in 20 plus years.
Yeah.
That'd be a good one. Amanda says, well, great to see you, Amanda. Agree, my favorites are 9.9 and 11.12. Yeah, they've been the favorites tonight. They've been really good. So thanks for tuning in and tasting along with us. And R11.11 is what pushed me into the distillery. Can't stop buying it now. Yeah, the R11s are hugely underrated and affordable, fun, and just really sort of vicious or viscous, I should say, rums. And Joel Rinaldi's comment, it's a big one, but I'll pop it up on the screen.
Yeah, great.
Restream doesn't actually give you it won't let you take up the whole screen. It's a long comment, but he says they definitely say the gap between single cask rums and OB rums are much greater than whiskey. In that OB rums are more refined and easier to drink. You don't find much similarities within the same distilleries. Usually with OB rums and whiskey and single cask whiskey.
Can I chime in there? Because that's a really good point, Joel. And I think what we need to appreciate is that the vast majority of OB rums is that they're blends. They're actually blends. A lot of the OBs will be heavy rum and light rum blended together. They'll at times have other additives put to them to either soften them or make them sweeter or make them more palatable. That's one of the main reasons why there's just such a huge difference. We're enjoying tonight single casks. Unadulterated, so there's going to be a huge difference. But that's a really good observation.
Absolutely, yeah. All right. And I'm seeing some comments here saying I had to pull the trigger on that R9.9 on the website. So much coconut goodness. We popped 6 bottles of the R9.9 as a preview for tonight's tasting up on the website. So if you did want to grab my bottle of that, go online. I think Dove, you got 2, and I can see that RK got 1. So I don't know how many are left. I'm not going to check live right now. I don't want to interrupt anything, but we've popped just a few up on the site to go along with tonight's tasting. So you're sort of getting in before it goes actually on an outturn. There you go. Now I'd encourage you all to maybe just pre-pour the last round for this evening. R2.13 funky fun flavors. Now we're heading back to R2. We're heading back to Guyana. And it's a little bit younger than the previous one, but it's only by a year, and it's a second fill ex-bourbon barrel. So if you do have a smidge of your first one left, it might be fun to do a side-by-side. This is also a preview. This one's not yet come out before.
Is this this will be the lowest ABV of all our rums tonight?
Yeah, you're right. It's only 50.8%.
Only 50.8%.
Yeah. It's a bit lower in proof. I mean, I don't know how that happened, but it's kind of fun. Wow. This is almost the nose for me straight away is like red apple skin.
Yeah.
Like this, just the red apple skins, or
Yep.
even red apple stickers. The glue on an apple sticker.
Now, are you getting delicious or Royal Gala?
Delicious. The
Yeah.
cheapest red apple. But that sort of like the you know, that, I don't know. I reckon the sticker on apple stickers have a taste, because we've all, I don't know about you guys. Maybe it's just because I'm just my brain, how it works. But honestly, we've all accidentally eaten an apple sticker before. I've eaten an apple sticker once before by accident. You just didn't spot the sticker and you ate the apple sticker. Maybe it's the apple sticker taste I'm getting. The menu got the wrong picture for this one. The proofreaders. Here we go. What did we put? We put Done to the Sea. Yes, we did put the wrong image on that. Our apologies. The bottle doesn't look too much different. It's still a grey bottle with the blue stripe, so it's not too far. We promise, but yeah, it is R2.13. We didn't send you 2 bottles of R11. Sorry.
There's a beautiful vanilla pastry note to this on the palate.
Pastry, yeah. Like an apricot Danish or almost, or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
I reckon I'm getting so many flavors out of this one. This is funky, fun flavors, and I think the name is apt for this one. This is great.
Another point, we talked about age earlier. It's worth noting also. You talked about it. It's rare to get rums at sort of these age statements, 15, 16, 17 years old. Let's not lose sight of the fact that the Angel share in this neck of the woods is significantly higher than what we see in Scotland. So, the losses in volume that you experience in this neck of the woods is huge. In Scotland, they typically talk about an average evaporation loss of about 2% per annum. In this part of the world, it's closer to 6%. So they're losing significantly more volume in the cask. What's interesting is that because of the humidity in that area, because we're obviously closer to the equator, the loss of water and alcohol is about the same. So, and in fact, you can lose a lot of volume in the cask, but the ABV stays reasonably high. In Scotland, of course, the water stays behind, and it's the alcohol that gets lost. So that's an interesting point as well. But that's one of the reasons why you don't see rums aged to particularly great ages in this neck of the woods, because if you waited 20, 25 years, you'd have nothing left in the barrel at the end.
And that's why there are some rums that are aged in different what do you call it? Continentally aged versus like aged in different continents as well, which provides different sort of different angel share.
Well, even age statements is an interesting discussion. As we touched on right at the start, there's no real hard and fast regulations depending on the country of origin. So in some countries, the age statement is an average rather than the minimum. So if you see a rum with an age statement of 8 years from some countries, that can mean anything between 2 and 16 blended together for an average of 8 years. So you got to be very careful about age statements in the rum world. Obviously, when you're buying through a society, what you see is what you get, but that's something to bear in mind.
Andrew Newcomb asks a great question here. I just want to throw up on screen. How is rum defined as value or other definitions? There's a few people, quite prominent rum people, who are trying very hard to bring more definition to rum. Richard Seal is one of those people who's quite vocal and you might know him from his RL Seal rums and other things. But Richard is one of those people who's extremely vocal about bringing improving definition in rum, because rum or rum or agricole, or as Andrew was saying about age statements, and some rums, even cases where it says a really big number on the front of the bottle, like it will say like Solera 24 or something, and it will almost be like, oh, it must be a 24-year-old rum, but it's probably all just like 2 or 3-year-old rum. But it's not. There's so much misinformation in rum that we try to avoid, obviously, at the society, with our transparency and our actual age statements and single cask as opposed to blended and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think anyone owns any sort of authority on the definitions per se, but there are certainly people barracking for it, just as they are in even Australian whiskey and other countries making spirit elsewhere. But yeah. And Dove tells me that he doesn't eat cheap apples. He only eats the best apples that don't have any stickers on them. Well, Dove, you know what? Sometimes I buy I buy whatever apples I can get at the supermarket. But there you go. And Owen's question: what's the society's relationship like with the distilleries? With the whiskey, I know you guys get direct for a lot of it, but well, I'm just brokered, or is there someone in the tropics working with the distilleries? Well, I mean, touching on what was said before, I mean, Ian Burrell did a lot of work with us and still does in terms of sourcing casks, in terms of talking about those relationships, and Ewan Campbell as well. So there's a lot sort of always going on with us in terms of sourcing. It might be, it's very rarely probably direct with rum. It's a lot of it would be either via someone and via Ian, something like that. But I know that's a really vague answer, but that's also, we can dig into that another time. I don't go too far down that path.
I know in the late 2000s, we had a fantastic relationship with a mob called Bristol Spirits, and Bristol Spirits were responsible for getting a whole stack of our non-whiskey spirits at that time. There was a period in the late 2000s when we were bottling apple brandies, for example, for the society, and various cider brandies came through at that time as well, and some of the Armagnacs and the cognacs came through at that time as well. So yeah, I think a good answer to that question might be it doesn't really matter where it comes from. What we do make sure of is its quality, and that's the important thing. Whether it's through a broker or direct is kind of secondary.
It's got to pass panel. That's the most important part. This is like, honestly, this is like, have you ever had one of those weird triangular bottles of cold pressed juice that you see around, and they're like clear apple juice or clear orange juice or something, and it looks weird, but they taste different, but they taste like apple juice. This is like a cold pressed apple juice spirit for me. This is almost
I generally have to draw down on my mortgage every time I want to buy a bottle of that juice, but it's good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me almost like it's almost like a rum Calvados or something going on here, and I can't pick out. This is the most Calvados-y spirit I think we've ever bottled. Maybe this is great.
Apart from the Calvadoses that we actually did bottle.
Well, yeah, okay. Apart from actual Calvados, but this is the Calvados, most Calvados spirit. Yeah. Dan, you got us twice. Well done. I like that. I really like that.
I've fallen into that trap that happens to us occasionally, Matt, where the quality of the spirit is so good that it's actually hard to talk about, and you forget you're on camera talking to an audience. I just want to enjoy this. That's just a lovely drop.
That's certainly. I think I'm going to go with R9 and that R2.13 as my favorite tonight. Yeah, 13 is great, and that's a piece of distilling history, but yeah. Thanks for the wonderful evening, says Dove. Yeah, you're welcome. This has been great. Having a chat about rum and us exploring the rock and rollers of rum and exploring some of the society single cask rums, because we do so many whiskey tastings, and it's great to sometimes deviate and sometimes explore what we've got coming in, what we've currently got, and then what we're able to offer to members. So, Andrew, thank you so much for hosting.
Look, absolute pleasure. And for Sydney members, I think this has inspired me. I think we might need to do this at a live event with live people in a real room, and that might be one of the events for Sydney members down the track.
And yeah, that'd be great. I'm sure that Sydney members would absolutely appreciate that. And Amanda says, I just got the last bottle of 9.9. You got to way ahead of the queue then, Amanda, because that's a pre-release. So well done. And weekday drinking, absolutely. Wednesday tastings help the week. Hump day, it's a hump day tasting. Come on, exactly. And R9 for Jason. I'd love to see your comments. Keep them coming through even after we've gone off live. Pop them in the thread of your favorites tonight. Any photos you took of your home setup, please post them in the group, of course, or tag us on Instagram, SMWS_AUS. Always love it. I'll just mention this was, of course, Rock and Rollers of Rum. This was our tasting for our March outturn. Which was all about music and malts. We could say malts. We could say rum. We could say music and spirits, but there we go. And of course, now you get to see, I told you I'd leak it right at the end here. We also are continuing the theme into April with Part 2, Music and Malts Part 2. Here it is, the other side of the cassette, the B-side, if you like. As it continues into April, there's the cover for April Outturn. Because we're a bit early for this stream than we normally would be in the month, it's actually really cool to be able to sort of preview this for you now and just show you the cover at least, and now you get to see them side by side. It's a sort of a 2-part outturn, if you like. We've just had Music and Malts, and then we're flipping the cassette and we're on to B-side. So really exciting outturn ahead for members, of course, coming up.
There's a comment from Owen Phillips there asking for more allocations. I try, mate. I grab what I can. Obviously, the Society of Bottles Rums from time to time. We do try and take the full allocation offered to us. There'll be more in the pipeline. There's always stuff in the pipeline. So, yeah, you won't go thirsty. Don't worry. And thank you also to Mr. Hamilton Brown, who put a comment there as well. Glad you enjoyed this tasting as well.
Is that one there? Got it.
Yeah, that's Paul. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Owen. And thank you, everyone who threw all the comments in. And big shout out to Alex Morse for jumping in with a bit of history. And lots of firsts and seconds and more requests for the Sydney rum tasting. So, Andrew, you got your work cut out for you. You're sorted. Thank you, everyone, again for joining us for another Society Virtual. This has been great fun. And I've got at least half a dram of each still to go. And if I had all of them in that sort of crazy proofs, I don't think I'd be talking straight now either. I don't think I do talk straight as it is, so that's all right.
I didn't notice the difference, mate. You're doing just fine. Let us not forget that this event was inspired by some chat on our Facebook group page.
Absolutely, yeah.
Facebook group. So that's what it exists for. The Facebook group is for members to have a chat, have some blather, have some banter. Maybe throw in a suggestion or two. We do watch. Matt and I are on there every day looking at the conversation. We chime in occasionally as well. Give us your thoughts. And this is what happens when conversation gets interesting.
And just to finish up, Amanda asks, is our 11.12 going to be available? Yes, it will be very shortly. Keep your eyes out for that. It'll be in an outturn coming to your inbox soon. In the meantime, we will catch up with you soon. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for being a part of this evening. And we'll see you for the next live stream.
Till next time.